Hey guys, Fskin here with another very profound tier list. Oh my god, this is the content Barony needs. Today we are going to take a look at Barony's races. Barony has 9 races, humans and 8 DLC races. And why are we making a tier list? Because it turns out some races may be more privileged than others.
Just like in real life, eh?
Oh, whoa, hey.
You need to leave!
Anyhow, let's cut to the chase. Humans. Humans are Barony's base race. They are the only race in the vanilla game and the one that is the most vanilla because they don't really have any gimmicks. Humans are neither resistant nor weak to any specific damage type. An advantage that humans have over other races is that they are friendly with other humans, which includes shopkeepers, so you can use shops completely freely. You can also recruit humans in the dungeon, but the humans in the dungeon are mostly very weak unless they are special NPCs, so the regular bozos are usually not worth keeping around. The best thing you can say about humans is that they simplify the game, like if you don't want to play with a lot of gimmicks, which includes negative gimmicks, you can't go wrong with humans. There are no bad class combinations. In fact, some of the special classes, like let's say the Accursed, which is usually linked to the vampire, is easier to play as a human because you have more choice when it comes to food. So really, if you're looking for a simple playthrough, a human is basically choice number 1. And because humans are kind of the baseline of the races in Barony, I think it's very fitting to put them into A tier. There's nothing that really stands out, but there's of course also nothing that makes them really bad. Like, it's just a baseline. Although you could argue that NPCs like King Arthur and Kali and the Zap Brigade are among the strongest NPCs you can recruit, same with the 4 elite guys you find in Hamlet, you can recruit them with the other classes as well using Polymorph, so yeah. All you need to do is be smart with your usage of Polymorph and you will have a lot of advantages that humans have with the monster classes. Goblin, in my opinion, one of the more interesting and unique races. Goblins are very strong, but also have very clear weaknesses that usually make me think twice whether I want to go for a goblin build, and I rarely play them because of their main drawback, which is the inability to remember spells from books. The only spells you can really learn are Frostbolt and Domination upon reaching casting and Magic 100, but other than that you are limited to staffs and books if you want to keep any spells. I'm a sucker for all the utility spells like Sleep and Fear. With goblins you will have to keep a book for that, and the books of course degrade and take away space in your inventory, so that's very inconvenient. But the goblins have interesting advantages. First of all, weapons and armor have a reduced chance to degrade, and when you level up one melee skill, the other melee skills level up with it. So as far as melee is concerned, Goblin is the most versatile class. You can use whatever you want and switch proficiencies mid-game. You find an artifact weapon early, you can use that, and at some point you can take another artifact weapon, it doesn't matter. You level up everything simultaneously. You level it up a little bit slower, like 30% slower, but that's still pretty good. Goblins are slightly weaker against axes, polearms and ranged, and I really mean slightly weaker because they take like 10% more damage. And they are also slightly strong against unarmed and swords. They only take 80% of unarmed damage and 90% sword damage. In my opinion, that barely makes a difference. What I really like about the goblin is that in the swamp you are so safe, because goblins are some of the most annoying creatures to fight against in the game. In the swamp, it's still early game, so you are not going to be OP just yet. And the goblins have ranged weapons, they have fire staffs that can genuinely one-shot you, sometimes even one-shot you without you being able to see them, because the range is so high. Just the fact that you can be a goblin, recruit these people and not be attacked by them makes the swamp a breeze in comparison. So I think that really adds to the goblin being a great early game race, and it's just really fun being able to use whatever weapon you want. I just think the advantages of the goblin kind of fizzle out in the late game, like at some point it doesn't make much of a difference anymore. You're just going to have your weapon of choice, 100 proficiency in every weapon class, but that won't really matter anymore. And then at some point you may just have been better off having a different race. Not to mention that not being able to learn spells at some point becomes really annoying. But for the early game, I think Goblin may just be one of the best choices. I'm going to place the Goblin in A tier, just below Humans. I think they are more fun to play. I think this spell thing kind of becomes more and more of a disadvantage as the game goes on, but I think they firmly belong into A tier. Yeah, the strengths are just really good, and being able to recruit goblins is just one of these things that if you're actually going for leadership, remember what I said about the average human being useless? The average goblin is actually pretty sturdy. So yeah, playing goblin, cool twist on the gameplay. Incubi. Blessed is cursed and cursed is blessed, meaning you have a blessed item, you can't get it off your body, but the cursed items are completely fine. This is interesting because it doesn't remove the significance of appraisal, it just reverses stuff. So if you play in a team, it's cool because the incubus can use stuff that no one else can use, like a cursed weapon, cursed armor piece. So basically one man's trash becomes the other one's treasure. Now the problem is, the best weapons in the game, like the artifact weapons, are for the most part blessed weapons. So those weapons, if you equip them, you won't be able to unequip them, which is kind of a nuisance. The good thing is, you don't exactly need to reverse the blessing, which you can do with cursed water, which is a hassle to get. You can't produce it, you can only duplicate it with an alembic. But the thing is, the blessed weapon won't be debuffed. Unlike if you were playing, let's say, a human and you had like a cursed weapon, the cursed weapon would deal less damage than it would if it was uncursed. So for the incubus, this isn't the biggest problem, because the artifact weapon is good, right? You can still buff it and buff it, you just can't take anything else in your hand, like you can't throw potions, stuff like that, which is a little bit of annoying, but maybe you can live with that. Of course you can always polymorph to be able to take it off, but then of course to unpolymorph you would have to have revert form, or like have some water, or like a pond, like a puddle of water to dip into. And the even bigger nuisance is that if you wanted to get rid of the nuisance by using cursed water and cursing it, it would be a bad choice actually, because you can't cast enchant weapon anymore. I mean you can, but whenever you do enchant weapon it just blesses the thing again. But hey, you can empty your inventory until all you have is your stack of enchant weapon scrolls. You can use the cursed water and voila, you have cursed enchant weapon, and now you can freely cast it onto your cursed artifact weapon. You realize where I'm going with this, right? It's all just a hassle. It's not even a strong debuff to the race, it's all just a hassle. This concept is interesting for like groups and like insignificant items. But for the significant items, which often come blessed, it's a nuisance. Good thing is you always have access to crystal weapons, which are basically the same in terms of power level, but they don't come with the special gimmicks that an artifact weapon have. And of course, if you don't have full proficiency, they break. But yeah. In general, I think the reversal of beatitude is more of a disadvantage of the entire race. When it comes to strengths and weaknesses against weapon types, it's more extreme than with the Goblin. For example, Incubi have a 20% magic resistance, but they are 30% weaker against range, also a 30% resistance against pole arms, and 20% weaker against swords. Also, Smite works on Incubi, which off the top of my head makes them weak against the NPC King Arthur, like the human special NPC who is already very strong, and ironically makes them even weaker against ranged enemies because they may have silver arrows. And I think the weakness against ranged is actually one of the more significant weaknesses in the game, because ranged monsters are already pretty strong. They have like a huge perception range, you can get surprised by arrows from enemies you didn't even see. So that makes the Incubus more susceptible to just getting one shot in, let's say, the swamp by a fire arrow, which already happens with other races. But of course, Incubi also come with some advantages. They spawn with the Arcane Mark spell, which can remove like strengths and resistances from mobs, which is very useful, for example, against kobolds, which are extremely sturdy against magic. If you cast Arcane Mark on them, magic is going to deal regular damage. This also goes for bosses, although looking at the code, the only boss that really has resistance against any damage type is Aridis. She's strong against magic, but yeah, you can remove that resistance as an Incubus. You have teleportation, which is kind of stupid. If you combine it with the Arcane Mark, you can teleport behind enemies. It removes their aggro on you, and it's probably meant to be something like, haha, surprise sneak attack on you, fool. But honestly, I think the fact that it removes aggro is the more interesting part about it, because if I want to kill an enemy, I would just kite them normally. But with this Arcane Mark and teleportation, I can get behind them and maybe escape, or I don't know, like if it's a cockatrice and you're in the citadel and you're getting cornered, maybe this will be your chance to get away. You can use regular teleportation for that as well, but teleport is kind of dumb because you have no idea where it's going to put you, and you really want to avoid getting teleported to a random part of the map unless it's really, really dire. And honestly, it shouldn't be that dire. Like, if it's dire enough that you consider teleporting to a random part of the map, you deserve the death. The best thing about them is being able to recruit succubi and incubi, but I still think that's worse than just being able to recruit goblins or being like neutral to goblins. So the Incubus I will place into B tier. There is really no justification for them to be any higher.
Succubus.
Succubi are just extremely similar to the Incubi. It's the female counterpart, but it counts as its own race, which also means that it has different strengths and weaknesses in terms of weapon types. They are only 10% resistant against pole arms as opposed to the Incubus with 30%. They have the same strength against magic and the same weakness against swords and smite, but they have no weakness against ranged. They take normal ranged damage, which in my opinion is already like a great advantage over the Incubus. Starting kit is kind of different. They have a polymorph spell. They come with teleportation, but no Arcane Mark, so it's just the random teleportation. They have the same gimmick with Amulet of Strangulation, so overall they are almost the exact same as the Incubus, but I think the resistance thing, being stronger against ranged, puts them above the Incubus just slightly enough to be above them in B tier, but still not in A tier. Being able to recruit succubi, incubi, and even humans if you confuse them or use booze is not enough to put them on the same level as goblins, which can just walk up to goblins in the swamp, one of the most dangerous enemy types in the game, and say, "Hi, wanna be friends?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course." And yeah. Succubi, incubi, sadly, although they have a cool aesthetic and they are enticingly erotic, just B tier. The automaton is very versatile. They are friendly with humans, shopkeepers. They can don both blessed and cursed items, although they won't get buffs through cursed items, which is a downside compared to succubi and incubi, but it's still an upside in regards to other races. The automaton has a boiler instead of a stomach. This means they don't eat food, they eat stuff like rocks, gems, scrolls of fire, or just scrolls in general, but scrolls of fire are the best ones, and firestorm potions. A heated boiler means MP regeneration. If the boiler loses too much heat, you will lose MP and you will also lose health at some point. So always keep it heated. If you keep it superheated, you are going to regenerate MP at a faster rate. Also, everything that superheats your boiler is basically like a mana potion, like it just boosts your MP instantly. You can also eat any kind of scrap, and you come with a spell that turns items near you into scrap. So if you have, let's say, a pickaxe, you can create rocks, you just keep gems and scrolls lying around. There's a lot of ways to find food as an automaton. Also, they are immune to burning. You get a bonus +20 tinkering when repairing items with the tinkering kit. So I think the automaton is extremely flexible, has a lot of interesting safeguards. They are weak against axes and maces, taking 40% more damage against maces and 30% more against axes. Swimming is also not a good idea because it's going to cool your boiler, but of course this can be alleviated by levitating or water walking. I think one of the best parts of the automaton is the ability to use gems, which are usually just an item for generating money to superheat your boiler, because it makes the automaton less reliant on alchemy to restore magic potions. And the immunities to burning and the abundance of food and the fact that you can wear blessed and cursed things make it so the automaton removes a lot of very annoying factors in the game. But automatons don't have huge advantages in my opinion. It's just removing a lot of small disadvantages, and they of course come with a big disadvantage against certain weapon types. So in general I would still put them below humans and goblins. I just think automatons lack a really strong advantage, and taking that much more damage against certain melee types can make it a little bit harder to have like a close range build, and melee weapons are usually the best kind of build you can have. So overall very balanced and just fits right into A tier below the other two. But it's close. It's really close. In my opinion, humans, goblins, automatons, almost interchangeable. I am willing to negotiate this. I'm just kidding, I'm not going to negotiate, I don't care. Vampires are a little bit cliche. They need to drink blood, they can't touch water, and they can fly. They spawn with Levitate and Bloodletting, two of the best spells in the game. With Levitate alone, you can reach all the spots of the map that you want. You can do early underworld with fewer problems than you would have without levitation. You can cheese the ghouls in Haunted Castle, and you can spam your casting and magic on like the start of the game, even before you enter the first floor. Additionally, if the vampire runs out of MP, they will use their HP instead. So effectively, as long as you're careful, you have a bigger MP pool, which is very useful for magic. Touching water is also less of a problem since you already have levitation from the start, so it's easily avoided. It's just a little bit of an MP trade. The vampire has strong stats: resistance against swords, axes, magic, and half damage against ranged. At least that's what the code says, but I haven't been able to find anything that suggests that this only applies to monster vampires, so if it's true, those are pretty good stats. Only a little bit weak against pole arms and maces, but that's almost insignificant. This is going to be quite the short rating. I am going to rate Vampire in S tier. I think the only weakness they have is the blood consumption, but with a little bit of experience in Barony, when you don't take as much time anymore and you get efficient at getting blood, and you know that with Polymorph in dire situations you'll be able to eat regular food, the problem and the disadvantage just isn't that great anymore. And even then, disregarding food problems, there are little other problems the vampire as a race has. They are weak to smite, which I've got to mention, but so are incubi, so are like succubi, and they offer much less than the vampire. Definitely one of the strongest races in the game in any combination. Insectoid. The Insectoid is kind of bad. They start with spells just like the vampire, just the Insectoid spells aren't that good. The best spell is probably Dash, followed by Flutter, which is like Levitation but much worse, and Spray Acid, which is probably one of the worst offensive spells in the entire game. Cool thing about Insectoids is, of course, they can friendship other Insectoids, Scarabs, Scorpions, which is great in the Sand Labyrinth, because that trivializes most of the danger there. They have a 30% resistance against maces, but a 30% weakness against both polearms and axes. They are also immune to poison and immune to rotten food, which brings us to their main gimmick, which is MP isn't MP, but energy. In that sense, the insectoid is a little bit similar to the automaton. You eat to regenerate your energy, and your energy bar is basically your MP. So to regenerate your MP, you just eat. You can eat everything that's related to regular food, but you can also drink fruit juice, booze, and magic restore potions. Those three are basically interchangeable as the insectoid. Now, this main gimmick of the insectoid is actually a big and huge stinker, because as opposed to the automaton, energy caps at some point. At some point in the game, your max energy will be reached, and that's where it's going to stay. So if you want to play anything related to any kind of magic user, I suggest you pack a lot of food and beverages because you're going to need them. But I mean, just because it caps doesn't mean it's not manageable, right? Like, I mean, what may the cap be? Is it 200? Is it like 150? What? 50? Well, if you ask me, that's pretty darn close to a travesty. If you want to play anything that even resembles an insectoid mage, you better pack some food, a lot of food, because you're going to need it. Know what the funniest combination of race and class is in Barony? Insectoid Conjurer. Did you know that the cost of your Summon Skeleton spell scales with the level of your Skeleton Knight? This means that at some point, I don't remember the exact level, I think around level 33, 34 maybe, the Skeleton Knight will cost more than 50 MP to conjure. Do you know what that means? That means the Insectoid Conjurer cannot do it anymore. It is impossible. The energy is capped at 50. Meaning the gimmick, the entire reason you picked the Conjurer class doesn't exist anymore. It's gated away from you. It's one of the anti-combos of Barony. It's a meme. The only way to circumvent it is to always relinquish the soul of your Skeleton Knight and only level the Sentinel. Because the Sentinel's level does not influence the MP cost, but that doesn't change that it's still a meme. So I don't even know what else there is to say about the Insectoid. I fail to see any big advantages. I like playing the Insectoid because I feel like the Insectoid is kind of stylish. It's different, but that's more from like a lore standpoint. If I want to use magic in any significant sense, I am going to hate my life playing Insectoid. I'm gonna be honest with you. But well, just remember that Barony isn't always about min-maxing and picking the best race. It's about challenge, it's about having fun. So yeah, still enjoy playing Insectoid, but here on the tier list where I evaluate how good a race is, it is kind of bad. It is kind of bad. Definite C tier below the rest so far. Skeleton. Their resistances and weaknesses are very similar to the vampire, with the little difference that skeletons are even stronger against swords and weaker against maces and polearms. I think the skeleton race is among the stronger races in the game. You can revive upon reaching 75 MP, which is completely bonkers because at some point in the game 75 is not going to be much, so you basically trade 1 restore magic if you have good alchemy and maybe blessed restore magics for a life-saving ability. This is really good. And the remaining mana turns into your HP, so if you have full mana and you die, you are just going to respawn with no mana, but full HP. So basically, as long as you have potions of restore magic, you are unkillable. This of course comes with a drawback: skeletons don't have to eat, which is convenient, but the HP and MP regen is very slow. I think it's a 1/4, and that is just as agonizingly slow as it sounds. Like, if you get any damage, if you waste any MP, it's gonna take forever for you to get it back. This is especially annoying in the early game. It gets better later when you have means of healing, like healing potions and stuff, but the means of mana regeneration are kind of hard to acquire. Like, the best you can do is the Sharur artifact mace or the Wraith's Gown, which is acquired extremely late though, and the Vampire Doublet, which removes HP regen though. So there are a lot of trade-offs. you are best off looking for alchemy so you can just go the easy way with restore magic potions. Additionally, you can't burn and you really suck at swimming, you are super slow in water. That's something to keep in mind. Overall though, I think the fact that you have life saving as a race ability, like 75 MP for not dying, I think that is as good as a race ability as it gets. So I'm putting Skeleton into S tier. And I'm not even sure if they are better than Vampire or not. I'm gonna put them above Vampire, but I honestly can't decide. I think overall Vampire have lesser drawbacks, but I think the life-saving thing is way stronger. Like, it's big, defining, super powerful gimmick, and it's just insanely strong. Like, if you play it right, you have enough mana, you literally cannot die. Add to that you can find amulets of life-saving, and you have like double insurance. So, in my opinion, Skeleton's just extremely strong. Really can't decide which one to put over the other, so if you have an opinion on that, feel free to comment. Speaking of the Skeleton's life-saving and insurance just made me remember the fact that Automaton is actually S++ tier, because it's the only race in the game with a death animation, so you know what you can do? Once you die, you press escape, leave the game, and you will find that your save file is still here, because officially you didn't die. Wow, you're literally immortal, you can go back in time. Is this actually like the lore? Is the lore that automatons realize that they are about to die and can shift back in time if they want to? We could actually make that a lore reason for save scumming. Nah, just kidding, save scumming is lame, and if you do it, I will not respect you. Also, funnily, I think having life saving is actually just better than save scumming. Goatman, yay. Last but not least, we have the not so beloved Goatman. I was thinking about putting Goatman into D tier initially, but then I pondered real hard and just realized how bad Insectoid actually is in my opinion, and so I'm kind of open to giving Goatman a chance. So let's take a gander at the facts. Goatmen take 40% more damage against magic, 10% more damage against ranged, axes and pole arms. The latter three weaknesses are kind of insignificant in my opinion. More significant are the race gimmicks of the Goatman. So the Goatman is usually hungover, unless you are drunk. When you drink booze as a Goatman, you will improve your strength, constitution and charisma. In exchange, you lose 25% of your dexterity and intelligence. Right from the start, we can immediately see that, like the Insectoid, the Goatman is a race who punishes certain playstyles, like magic, and since you lose dexterity as well, ranged. You can, however, just use Cure Ailment to remove your hangovers, which is pretty useful, because as I said, with magic and ranged, you kind of don't want to drink booze all the time. Maybe you want sometimes, it can be situational, but you don't want to do it all times because it just nerfs your damage and movement and magic resistance. You don't want that. So if you have such a build, you are kind of dependent on Cure Ailment, and you are gatekept from using one of Goatman's main gimmicks, which is buffing themselves with booze. So what else do Goatmen do? They can make others drunk and find allies. This is actually pretty cool. You can do it with humans, goblins, succubi and incubi, which can be pretty practical because you can recruit a lot of strong allies early on. It's a little bit of a hassle, but with the aforementioned like builds, if you're focused on magic and ranged, you may not need as much booze anyway, so you can use that to get some strong followers instead. If, however, you have a build that synergizes well with the Goatman's strengths, then it can be pretty cool. You get strength, constitution, which helps you in battle a lot. You also gain free action, which prevents you from getting slapped, getting stunned, getting slowed, which is very convenient. I especially like this against like mages, like Eridus, who always has cold spells and is really annoying getting hit by them. You can avoid a lot of damage by having free action constantly. Also, it makes it much less annoying to play in the ruins, for example, because of the spell traps that slow you, sleep you, and deal weird status effects to you. You can drink from fountains, which will drop you extra potions. You can always eat tin cans, which also can give you buffs. You know what? Thinking about it, I don't even know why I was so negatively biased against the Goatmen earlier. I was genuinely considering putting them in D tier, an entire tier below insectoids. Nah man, Goatmen they are much better than insectoids. Now that I read this, and I mean, during the making of this video, I remembered that you can use Cure Ailment to cure your hangover and play ranged and mage with like little negative effects. Goatmen are underrated, man. They are underrated. A tier. I'm gonna put the Goatmen above the Automaton because I'm seeing a real lack of disadvantages, and I haven't thought about it that much, but free action is actually pretty cool to have. Huh. I really didn't expect this to happen when I started making this tier list, but here's the final verdict. Once again guys, thanks for watching. I'm gonna work on more Barony content. Let me know in the comments if you have any particular ideas. And I plan on making a speedrunning guide soon. I planned on making one for months, but there have been delays and the audio is already recorded, so I may get to that soon. Also, I'm working on a mod. And once I'm confident the mod is ready for release, you are going to hear about it on this channel. So subscribe, like, comment, feedback, criticism, hate. Give it all to me, baby. I'm ready. Peace.